Welcome to BBC London this Monday evening. We start with a closer look at the climate change protests here in London that are back again 6 months after they brought parts of central London to a standstill. The group Extinction Rebellion says it wants to do it on a bigger scale than last time. So what has happened where, how have Londoners been affected and how long could it go on for? In a moment, we'll look ahead to the rest of the week. First, Caroline Davis reports on today's protests.
This Extinction Rebellion said was just the start. Day one of 2 weeks of their planned disruption in London. It was focused around Westminster. In Trafalgar Square, demonstrators dressed in red processed through the streets. They blocked Westminster Bridge, even acting out a wedding ceremony. And outside the Home Office, protesters chained themselves to the underside of a lorry. Those that joined in were adamant that the disruption they were causing was needed.
Do you feel like this sort of direct action helps your cause?
It's just really hard because, yes, it's the only way we're getting noticed. And I hate doing this. I'm not naturally, a kind of protester, but I just feel that nothing's happening.
We just have to keep waking people up because they're so enmeshed in everything that they're doing, and they've got their eyes so blinkered to everything that they just don't realise that we've got to start acting like today.
We've tried petitioning, we've tried peaceful marches, we've tried, writing to local MPs, writing to our MPs of our constituencies, and it's just not making the cut.
But those stuck in traffic caused by road closures had a mixed response.
I'm against the protest because all it does is creates more actual fumes and traffic all around here.
Just inconvenience, really. I don't know why, but there's always a protest on and things like that, and it just puts everyone out, really.
Well, it's important, so I think if we bear a bit of a longer journey, because if it's a good cause, yeah.
It's got to be done, isn't it? It's something's got to be done, but for a little bit of traffic to get home a few hours later, what's the problem?
Protesters did what they could to show they had no intention of moving, from staging sit-ins to erecting campsites and marquees with a makeshift kitchen.
The protesters have been out on the streets for over 5 hours now, and it started to rain, but people have just put their waterproofs on. The tents are already up as well. Doesn't seem to have pulled many of them off the streets.
Many of the protesters said that they felt the direct action that Extinction Rebellion took in April had led to some change, and that as more was needed, this was the way to do it. But 6 months on, the response may not be the same.
It's chalk and cheese. I think the police are much more resilient. They're much more determined to stop these protesters getting out of hand. You can see that straight away. The arrests that have been already made, they're very, very proactive, whereas on the last occasion, they just sat back and let the protesters take over.
By mid-afternoon, the police had begun to clear protesters in some locations, arresting over 200. But by the time evening was drawing in, many protesters were still determined not to leave. Caroline Davis, BBC London.
OK, let's get the latest now, shall we, from James Waterhouse, who's by Lambeth Bridge, one of the protest campsites. James.
Riz, well, the rain has been coming down in the last 20 minutes, but the puddle of protesters here has actually been getting smaller. Over here, the police have really started to control things to try and free up the road, which just now, traffic has started to come through down Millbank towards Westminster. As we move across here, you can see just how much smaller the crowd of protesters is. There's a large wooden structure there where some have chained themselves to. Previously, there was a tent there where you could hear the smell of burning metal as someone was freed from chains with an angle grinder. The police say, the Chief Constable of the Met Police says she's happy, Cressida Dick, with the operation so far. But here's what she said to BBC London when asked whether police needed more powers.
We have been in discussion since last April with the government about the possibility of new powers, undoubtedly. Some things about the legislation, which dates back to the mid-80s, is outdated. Some of the ways in which we can, at the moment, not easily prevent people from coming back round and protesting again, we would like to close that loophole.
So as I say, the scene is very different. There was meditation going on. That someone said it was once looking like Camden Market, which was a fairly fair assessment. There were food stalls out, and it was certainly a lot louder with a percussion band. But right now, things have been very much condensed, and you can really hear occasionally applause as protesters are led through on handcuffs after clearly being arrested from Parliament Square, which is about 100 metres along Millbank there. There's currently an isolated area that has been sealed off by officers, but we can now join from there Victoria Hollins.
Yeah, just walked through Parliament Square, and it's not a sight you get very often. You probably can't see just over my shoulder. The only thing going around there is bicycles or people on foot. It is sort of at the centre or the edge of several of those protest points that you mentioned there, James. We are just by Westminster Abbey, and just over here is another of the sites of protest. The tents are up, the rain coming down. One of those taking part today is Liam Norton. Thanks for joining us. We saw a lot of activity back in April. Why, as a group, why as people, did you feel it necessary to do this again?
Because what we haven't seen in the time since April is any meaningful action by this government on the climate and ecological emergency. And what we're trying to tell the government is that it's no good just saying it's an emergency. You have to act like it's real. And so that's why we're here today. We're here today to cause disruption, because it is literally the last option that we have left. So that's why we're back now.
You mentioned that disruption. Is there any concern on your part that that is what will be remembered by Londoners, the disruption, not the message?
Well, look, it's important to remember what the context of the disruption is. Okay, so what we're trying to tell Londoners is that the situation is so bad and the emergency is so bad that disruption is necessary to call the alarm, to raise the alarm, to let everybody know, to try and tell the truth about how bad this crisis is. And when we say climate and ecological emergency, what we're talking about with the consequences of that, which is social collapse, which the consequences of social collapse are that people are going to starve, there's going to be war. These are the things, but these are the things that are important in the context of the disruption, and it's important to remember that.
Absolutely, and also important to people is what the police are doing. And when one of the police comes out, a senior police officer, and says that they can't deliver the services that they want because of the activity of protesters, that must cause you concern, doesn't it?
Well, look, the government have cut the police budget by 40% in the last 10 years.
Is it still right to be doing this then, now?
This is where you have to think about the context of the problem, the scale of the crisis. And this is what we're talking about. This is how urgent it is. Okay.
And you're going to be here for the next couple of weeks?
We're going to be here for the next couple of weeks, and I'm appealing to Londoners to just do a little bit of investigation about what we're talking about here. We're talking about a real crisis, and we want Londoners to join us on the streets. That's what we're asking of you today.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we have to leave it there. Well, as you can hear, there's some speeches going on in the background, and this tent camp is likely to be here for some time to come. Riz.
OK, with the latest there, Victoria, thanks very much.